1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the 11th episode of the Side of the Desk podcast, where each month I have the pleasure of chatting with industry trailblazers and delving into their extraordinary journeys to success, with recruitment obviously being the shining star in all of their narratives. And guess what? We're coming to you live today on LinkedIn and YouTube, so you can be part of the episode in real time, but worry not if life has thrown you a curveball and you can't join us right now. We totally understand. Everything will be on the website and it's going to be there for their eternity, which I'm not sure if is a good thing. So anyway, you were here today to find out more about our guest, who the tables have turned a bit today with the interviewing, because he's a true dynamo in the world of business events and exhibitions. He's the production director of Clear Path Analysis and the creative genius, I think that's pushing it a bit far, behind the Dan Assor Show podcast. He's an experienced business events and exhibitions professional who has been included in, bit deep breath, Eventex 2022 Top 100 Most Influential People in the Events Industry. That's a nice award. Glisser's 2021 Top 59 of the Most Influential People in Virtual Events, and Accelevents Top 50 Influential Event Planners to Follow. Ooh, welcome, Dan. Would you want to add anything to that monster intro?
Hello, welcome. Yeah, how are you? It's nice to be here. Awards. Yeah, nice to get awards, isn't it? Get a bit of recognition.
That's the longest one I've ever seen. Eventex 2022 Top 100 Most Influential People in the Events Industry. You must have had an award like this or a name. It must have been like that.
I just put them up there so my mum can see them. You know, just makes her proud that I didn't waste my education. Thank you for that great video, by the way. It took me back. Some of the video clips were from when I first started the podcast in lockdown. Especially the last one. I was like, oh God, I think it was a bit heavier then.
Oh no, I was the other way. I was a lot lighter during it. I mean, every guest we have on, Naomi Rose, who produces this and who's amazing. Thanks, Naomi. Every guest we have on is like, can I have a copy of that video? I'm like, yeah, please. She'll get it to you. Don't worry at all. Absolutely not a problem. So listen, just before we sort of dive in to all of our people watching and obviously listening, we are live right now. That means please, drop your comments, share your thoughts, introduce yourself. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and I'm sure we'll put some questions to Dan as we get them. So, Dan, let's get into the nitty-gritty. So, obviously, I've sort of known you from the peripheral, probably around the pandemic, probably was when, I think most of us sort of started that sort of that community, as it were. But I'm sure, our viewers and listeners want to know more about you behind the scenes. So, just tell us, how did you get into the world of events? How did that journey, all the way back as far as you want to go, but how did you find this industry that we love?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, good question. I guess I won't take you, otherwise this will be like a recruitment interview. I won't take you through my whole CV because it's a good 25 years. So we'll be here for hours. But I guess my career is sort of a tale of two halves. The first sort of 10 to 12 years, publishing, media, a bit of software development, running businesses in that area. And then towards the end of my tenure at a company called Totally PLC, of which I was the CEO of, we held some events for the communities that we served. And I thought, hey, I actually quite enjoy doing this. So my first event was actually in 2010. And given my first job was in 1997, so it was a good 13 years into. I'm really dating myself here. People that are listening are like, 1997. When was that?
Is there a year before 2000? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just done some events. So anyway, I exited that business through a management buyout. We sold it to some of the management, and because I'd just done some events, I sort of got that bug, and everyone listening will sort of know that. I really enjoyed the process of putting it on. Seems to turn out quite well. I thought, hey, I can do this by myself. And yeah, I didn't really have an idea. So I thought, right, want to do an event. So I sort of scanned some of the shows in London. I literally turned up at a bunch of shows. and bizarrely stumbled across what was then the 50 plus show. Not sure it's going anymore in the current guise. It was at Olympia, and
As
it
in
was
50 plus age or 50
yeah,
plus?
sorry, 50 plus age. So a lot
Yeah.
of talks about retirement, finance, healthy living, all that sort of stuff. But it was a consumer show, right? Also had a lot of wheel writing, which is a little bit scary. So
Yeah.
walk around Olympia. I thought, yes, it's a great show, but maybe I can do that for the part of the world that I live in, which is sort of North London. So roll forward a year, I had hired out, and this is 2013, I'd hired out the Great Hall at Alexandra Palace. For those that know it, it's a great venue in North London, has a lot of concerts there, and shows, actually like the Knitting and Stitching show every October, which is there. Also the snooker and darts, and also darts, the World Darts Championship every Christmas is held there as well. Anyway, so roll forward a year, I'd launched what I had called the Young at Heart show, and it was a consumer show for North London, Herts, Essex, over 50s. Lots of different zones, so finance, health, food, fashion shows, and so on. It was hosted by Nick Ferrari, for those that aren't aware.
Right, yeah.
A media personality, LBC radio news presenter. He's on Sky and lots of channels. I knew him through some of the other events I did at the previous company that I mentioned. I had Esther Ranson, again, for those that aren't aware. She was big back in the day.
3 years, and I'd be going to that 50 plus event.
There you go. I mean, I wasn't even, again, I think I was 40 maybe, or 39. Cut long story short, we had about 5,000 people and about 200 exhibitors, made a bit of money. But if I'm honest, when I sort of came off the back of it, I thought, look, I probably need a bit more experience in doing this. And I was introduced to Andy Center, who's no longer with us. He was the founder, former CEO of Closer Still Media. And Closer Still, for those that aren't aware, now is a global international trade show and events organizer. Back then, sort of 2014, 2015, it had only recently launched a couple of years before. It was very much UK based, had a few UK trade shows. And he said to me, look, we're looking for people that clearly have displayed sort of entrepreneurial traits. You've launched your own show, but maybe want a bit of security of earning a living, but also having a stake.
Eating, having a house, a roof,
But also having a stake in the business that you drive for us. So it was quite a unique model at the time because it was proper equity, but also getting a salary, right? So it sort of attracted people like myself and others that wanted to sort of fly solo, but in a bit of a secure surrounding. Had a great time at Closer Still Media. Actually had 2 stints at Closer Still. Sandwiched in between, I was running the Idle Home shows for Media 10. Great experience. Big consumer shows. Idle Home show, been going for over 100 years. Used to be the Daily Mail Idle Home show. Media 10 picked it up about 15 years ago. And yeah, so that was really it. Two stints at Closer Still Media. Did my own thing. Idle Home show for Media 10, and then obviously pandemic hit and I was doing nothing. Yeah. And then most recently I have been at ClearPath Analysis, as you mentioned, so it's more sort of conferences, B2B in the institutional finance space.
I think a lot of people will be very surprised because you're a bit of a media darling. You're a media personality. You do your podcast is brilliant. I can only aspire to be where you are. Ours is more of a muck around compared to your serious proper job one. But you've sort of done that. You've been there. You've done it. You've had that experience. And you said the word bug, and I love that word. And we normally hear people say like fell in love or fell into it. Events. But that bug, Can you describe what that bug was? Like what was it that just went? This is it. This is going to be what I want to do.
Well, I think, coming back to the show I did just before I left the business I was running in 2012, we had hired out a good chunk of Wembley Stadium, or the sort of conference part of it. So they have a number of sort of areas outside of the main stadium. And I think the process of launching something, so you come up with an idea, right? And you think, yeah, this is going to be great. And then you talk to lots of people and it's sort of like evolves and morphs into something else. Then you spend a good chunk of time, if you're just back then, it was just one event a year, you spend like 9 to 12 months putting this thing together.
Mm.
And obviously all the work that goes into it. And then you turn up on site and it's like, wow, we came up with this idea 12 months ago. And here we are on this occasion at Wembley Stadium, and 10,000 people are walking through the door. And we got acts and performers, and you just, you try, you can't always do this because you're running around on site, to sit back and take it all in and think, this is genius. You've actually created something that people want. And it is an infectious thing to have, right? It really sort of takes hold of you. And I think that's been the same throughout the last 10 to 12 years, where every time, I've planned an event, whether it's a launch or even if it's not a launch, it's happening for the second or third time. It's always a bit different each time, right? Because you come off site and you think about how you can improve and react to what the community wants that's coming down there. And I just think, turning up on site after having built something, you rarely get the opportunity to do that. And I also think, secondly, the camaraderie of the teamwork that goes into putting on an event, right? Could be fractious and tense at times. There's always tension between departments, and we want to do this, and ops tell you can't do that, quite rightly, because they probably kill somebody.
Health and safety.
Health and safety, or we want to do this big marketing campaign, but budgets are only a certain amount. But then you all sort of come on site, and it's an amazing experience to see the team dynamic from the ops team, who are amazing, putting it together with all the sort of external suppliers, the sales teams that are obviously speaking to your clients. So there's nothing quite like being on site with the rest of the team.
Yeah.
The Ideal Home Show, when I did it, was 17 days. So you're
really? On site 17 days?
Well, you're actually on site for like 30, or the ops teams were, because the build. And so you go through a lot of range of emotions, excitement, tiredness, ups, downs, speaking to clients that need your attention, running from one side of the building to another. There's nothing quite like it, right? So I think a mixture of those elements.
I think it's interesting as well, because obviously the work I do, most of my work is senior, so obviously people have been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, but I do a lot of work on junior, mid-level talent coming into the industry. And that longevity piece, I don't think people now take the time on site. And I don't know whether that's because of lack of budget for people, or I don't know what it is, but I don't see as many people sort of saying, like you've just said, the event itself, I was really taking in. People, I think, are a bit like, oh, it's done now, whereas I remember the team, because my rough maths says you've been doing this for 20 odd years, and you don't do that in an industry unless you take the time to go, actually, what's that phrase, smell the roses and things like that.
I think it's important to recognize what you've achieved. You do tend to have like a round up at the end. You get together and you celebrate what you've done and how much you've rebooked and how things worked and all this sort of stuff. But then sometimes there is a tendency to just get back in the office on the Monday or whenever it is, and start all over again. And that sometimes is a challenge, mentally as well, because you think, oh, I've got to do it all again. But you get yourself back up. But I think, listen, in life, not just in business, it's really important to recognize things that you've achieved, right? Both individually and as a team, because otherwise, what else are we doing here? Otherwise you're just stuck on a hamster wheel, and it's sort of never ending. So I think you're right, especially with the junior members of the team. If it is their first show, is their first event, let them sort of take it all in. And recognize those achievements.
I mean, 2 decades you've been across everything, haven't you? The B2B, B2C, software, well, everything really. What do you think continues to keep you in it? What is it that drives you, inspires you? How do you keep that energy for the industry day to day?
Again, good question. As I said, I've been in events 12, 13 years. I think if you look at what I've done, I have had a lot of experiences. If I'm honest, just the person I am, I like to do new things quite often, either new things within the same company or possibly in a different one. That's what excites me and keeps me fresh. I have a lot of credit for people that stay with the same thing for 20 years, but everyone's different. So I think also the industry and events specifically is ever evolving.
Yeah.
And we had that with the pandemic, but we still evolved. We evolved into virtual. We didn't just stop and do nothing for 3 years. So, whilst there are common traits of an event 20 years ago compared to an event today, lots of similarities. There's also lots of differences in terms of how we get people to events.
Yeah.
The technology, the whole community piece, how we promote the events, what experience they have on site. So lots of changes. So for me, in summary, as I said, I like to be involved in different things, and the events industry allows you to do that. That's just plays to my personality. But also generally the event experience is different.
And it's that evolution. I think the only thing we've been guilty of, I think, as an industry is, and I think the pandemic showed us this, is our evolution has come quite reactive. And I was reading something, Julius Solaris, who was a guest on the show, actually.
Who doesn't know Julius Solaris?
I know, yeah. If you don't know Julius, go follow him. His content is just incredible. I'm talking to viewers and stuff, but he put something on about the fact that we're now, as an industry, a bit more hardened, a bit more ready. And if there was another pandemic, God forbid, or if there is a recession, God forbid, I think the industry has learned from that. And I think you mentioned something there. I'm interested to find out where you sit. What's in the industry now that's exciting? What are you seeing now? Not reactive, like all that stuff, but what are you seeing? Because as a recruiter, I get told AI is going to replace me every day, or VR, or tech. What's sort of with that evolution you said? What is it you're seeing? Sort of thinking, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'd say sometimes you always have to react to things. You don't always know what's around the corner. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We could sit here and say, we're ready for another pandemic. Could be something else. Right. So, let's face it, we don't always know what's happening. But we've got a hunch, and we still have to plan for things that we think are going to happen. I think in terms of changes, demographic has been spoken about a lot. People clearly that went to events 20 years ago are still going to events, but if you're let's take a trade show, people that are now decision makers have grown up, the Instagram, Snapchat generation coming into your events. So they're going to demand something different in terms of the event design. And I see it on social media. You see now, trade show organizers who are trying to, I think the sort of catchphrase of the day is festivalize an event. Whether
festival,
hopefully not. But even trade shows, which compared to consumer shows, we think it's B2B, it's a bit more stuffy. They're trying to make it a bit more exciting, whether that's having like DJs on stands, also trying to collaborate with exhibitors to get them to understand that they need to do a few different things to attract people to their stand. Yeah. So it's the content is definitely changing. The pandemic has taught us that, people now understand they can get lots of content online. So it's no longer just enough just to put, lectures and seminars on an event. It needs to be an experience. Yeah. And I think previously experiential was more reserved for consumer shows and festivals because people expected it, right, as a day out. Yeah. Whereas B2B, it was maybe expected. That's where they came to learn and for educational content. But I think the two are ever more merging. Yeah. In terms of the approach, you need to get someone off their seat, and people now have a lot of choice, ever more choice, and they're more discerning about where they go to. And the pandemic allowed people to stop and think, actually, do I need to attend this? Did I miss it? This is both exhibitors and delegates. Yeah. So we have to. I think evolution rather than revolution. Great. Is definitely key. I think you asked me what else sort of excites me in the sector. I think it's sort of a golden age for independent show organisers. And by that, I mean the opportunity to build and exit your business has never been more obvious. There's a lot of, in the city, they would call it dry powder. A lot of money out there for acquisitions. We've seen lots over the last few months. only yesterday, another one by Close to Still Media. The big boys, Informa taking over Tarsus. So lots of acquisitions going on. And I think, if you've got a good idea, it's not impossible now within 2, 3, 4 years to achieve some decent money if you have a good idea for a show. So I think that's exciting. And it's not ridiculously hard to set up an event in our sector. As long as you've got a good idea and you speak to your market. Obviously, just in terms of the way the events are put together, you can cash flow it pretty well, getting a couple of sponsors sort of in advance. So yeah, I think there's lots of exciting things. There's lots of conversations going on about some hot topics which are core to society, and you're heavily involved in one of them, DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I definitely see more of that, or lots of talk. You would tell me how much is whether there's enough action, but it's got to start somewhere. Obviously, sustainability is now front and center. Regardless of what Rishi Sunak is currently doing in the UK and rolling back on some of his policies.
Can't make it up, can you really?
So I think the democratization of media, social media, means there's no hiding place.
Yeah.
For event organizers, and reviews, people will tell you what they want. But I think that's a positive. It pushes us forward, right? Because we know everything's going to be out there. Anyway, it's a long answer to your question.
No, it's really interesting. And I think, you mentioned some of those companies, the VCs that are coming in, BlackRock. These people don't come into an industry for a laugh or on a punt. They haven't, they've done their punting times. They've done their gambling. They're now into like sure things, And I think it is really interesting. In fact, I've got an idea for an event that I've had in my eye. I'll talk to you after. I just want it to happen so much. But anyway, I'll talk to you after. But yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting. And I think you're absolutely right. It's that social media aspect of it, I think, with that not hiding. I also see the flip side of that in that, we joked about fire, but, like a buzz can be built on social media with no actual credible anything behind it, So I find that, I'm not an old man, but I do find social. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I can't deal with that. I don't need that negativity in my life. Just be careful of it, isn't it? I suppose. Right. I do have to bring this sort of back to recruitment at some point because I could talk to you for hours. With your experience, you have very extensive. You've obviously changed, not changed sectors, but you've sort of organically moved into those. You're going to have positive and negative experience about recruitment and that sort of bridge. Take us back to any stories that jump in your head. Anything sort of that pops up regarding recruitment, positive or negative?
Yeah, I think let's just sort of define the word recruitment. If I think from myself, how did I sort of end up in certain roles, right? If you can just allow me that sort of flexibility of the term.
Yeah, of course.
My first ever role I got through my mum's hairdresser. Bizarrely,
ironic for a pair of us, isn't it?
Ironic. I came out of university with a history degree, not really knowing what I should be doing, and my mum's in the sort of hairdresser chair, and she said, "Oh, my boy Daniel," she still calls me Daniel. Doesn't know what he's going to do. He's got a history degree. Anything you can help him with, literally. And it just so happened that the hairdresser knew a very influential guy in the advertising world, and roll forward, ended up working there for a few years. Lots of my roles have come through word of mouth and contacts. Having said that, I had a really positive experience with a recruiter who got me the role and introduced me to Andy Center that I just mentioned, the Close to Still Media. So I think recruitment, if it's done well, which it was for me at that point in time, can be a really rewarding experience. On the flip side, I've interviewed thousands of people, not thousands, probably a good high hundreds of people over the years. And if I'm honest, at the beginning, I was probably terrible at it. I was probably hiring people that were too much like me, right? Because I was like, I know what I want. I want me, And I think you probably see this. People fall into that trap. It's quite hard not to, right? To sort of keep an open mind. But over the years, I've definitely evolved in that, and I think bringing other people into the conversation, they obviously have a role to play rather than just being there for the sake of it. I've seen your videos. And, I think I now realize all these years later as well, and it's really important that it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I know we talk about this a lot, but it's really important. It's not just me or anyone else who's hiring, interviewing that candidate. It's absolutely, I think, even more so now because the people coming into the market, especially the junior roles, they're interviewing you, right? They want to know what you're like as an individual, as an organization. We talk about reputational being online, so people are investigating that beforehand as well. And I think, at its core, you're changing someone's life.
Yeah.
Potentially, right? Even if they're
huge, aren't they?
Even if you're experienced. When I moved, when I'm 35, it's life changing, and can be even more scary when you're older because you typically more responsibilities.
Yeah.
So you're less risk free and less risk averse. So I think we need to, keep that in mind when we're recruiting. I think there's been, and you could probably tell me more about this, an explosion of talent acquisition teams or internal talent teams. I think, if I talk honestly, sometimes that's a positive experience. I think sometimes you'll probably testify that can frustrate the process. But as long as they're there to work with the candidates and the recruiters, I think that's fine. And I think, it's about building relationships, not just about filling vacancies. Understanding where that individual fits into the organization. And look, I've spoken to recruiters that, if I'm honest, I don't think, sometimes you just get the impression that they're just there to fill a number.
Yeah.
And others that are really good at their job, but that happens in every job and every walk of life. I don't think recruiters should get a bad press for that, but I think it's more about recruitment. It's the whole, as I was just trying to explain, it's the whole package behind what you're trying to achieve as a recruiter, as a hirer, and as someone that's being hired as a potential employee.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we've all, for example, had experiences of bad plumbers or bad mechanics or bad something. A, it doesn't stop you using them again, but B, it makes you really do a bit more analysis of the next one you use. But with recruitment, you're absolutely right. I myself, when I went to Sledge, I was headhunted from the company. The recruiter led me down a certain path. Suddenly, I've left a job I've been in for 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm sat in another job, but also I'm a grown up. I've made that decision, and so did Sledge. And suddenly you're like, bloody recruiter, and it's very easy. You're like, bloody recruiter, because you sort of believe that. But the word of mouth thing's really interesting. In fact, I've got a post going out next week.
Yeah.
If you're new to the industry and you're like, well, I don't know anyone. What if I don't have any links?
Sure.
It's not. But the other end, some of the work, in fact, 90% of the worst hires I've ever seen on word of mouth is because you're stuck. Like, you introduced me to someone, say, Rob, this is Sarah, she's amazing. I'm now speaking to Sarah with like, right, Dan's, and what happens is you forget about due diligence, because you're like, well, Dan said you're great, so you must be great.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've got this post going out about, because what happens is, I think it says something like, employers, please stop recruiting the mates of your connections, because that will just keep the industry the same, same due diligence, and probably a bit on DEI, or EDI, as you touched on there, because you're just keeping the people that are in your remit in work. And if you're coming into the industry, like you said, it's a bit like, well, how is that how I have to get ahead? And it's great. What's it called? It's not who you know, it's what they know or what they do. So it's great to introduce to people, but you've got to do that due diligence. You've got to do that sort of follow through.
Yeah, I think you make some good points as well. Listen, I'll accept that I grew up in a position of inverted commas privilege, right? My parents, my peer group probably knew a few people that were doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Now, actually, what you just made a really good point. If we talk about society and trying to make it more equitable, and I think now, if I'm not mistaken, law firms do this. They're not allowed to just have their mates and their mates' sons do articles. They take a certain amount of people in, because it's just the same people.
Yeah.
Friends of friends of friends. So actually, they're not allowed to do that anymore. They actually, people that come into it have to go through the process that everyone else goes through, which levels out the playing field. And thinking about it, that's really important. Yes, my kids are 15 in 5 years. Would I let them to exploit relationships that I've got? Yes.
Yeah, hell
Also,
yeah.
what I do, without sounding ridiculous, I still want them to grow up in a fair world and actually have their mates also have similar opportunities. But if they can't take advantage of contacts, however, it is a tough world, so you do need to try and get an edge, some way, shape, or form. I would say, if you start off with no contacts, it is now easier than ever if you put yourself out there to build a network, right? And I see it a lot. Naomi being one who's been working with you, lots of other event grads and people that have come into the event community are doing a stunning job on social media, specifically LinkedIn, putting themselves out there. Sometimes you'll do stuff and you'll attract positive stuff as well. But I take your point. Just because someone's recommended someone doesn't mean they're good for the job.
Yeah,
it means that they like the person that they've.
Exactly. No, I'm not going to hire you because you'll be like, why aren't you hiring my mate?
Yeah.
I'll talk about that forever. But we do have to play our game. So this is this is our recruitment hot seat, right? It's completely relaxed. Don't worry, it's not an interview. So a little VT is going to run, and literally it is little. I'm then going to ask you 7, points around recruitment, and all I'm asking for is what is the first thing that comes into your head. It can be a word, it can be a phrase, but it's just short, sharp. Don't worry, a bit of fun. It just makes really nice edit on copy.
No swearing.
No swearing. Yeah, no swearing. Right. Okay, we'll go with the VT. Thanks, Simon. There we go. Told you it was quick. Right. So here we go. Number 1. What first pops into your head when I say the word interview?
Scary.
Bloody hell. Depends on what side with you, though, which side of the interview. But there you go. Number 2, recruitment, as in recruitment as a general, not agencies.
Important.
I like that. Number 3, be careful here, recruiter. As in recruiter, agency, recruiter, external.
I guess what one word?
Invaluable, cheap. Thank you, Dan, for that. I appreciate that.
I said important before for the first one. So following on from that, yes, I would say can be very useful in the process. I know it's not one. No,
it doesn't have to be one word. We're going to edit it in. It's going to be like this: integral to the fabric of the events industry.
Oh yes, you sent me a note. Sorry. Yeah.
Number 4, salary.
Obviously important, and I agree with you. When people ask you what you're currently earning, you probably should keep it to yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Always do. Number 5, job descriptions.
Currently, I see lots of poor job descriptions. Could do better.
Go onto Robert's page and see his video job adverts, please. Number 6, talent.
I think for the events industry, lots of great talent. Just need to make sure that we search in the right places and attract people to the industry.
Oh, I like that. Right places. And last but not least, number 7, event professionals.
Hardworking, can be emotional, working in an industry that's very rewarding, and there's lots of them. It's a broad industry. Definitely get yourself involved.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. That was our
that was hard.
That was it. It was all right. It's good though, isn't it? I like that. Okay, so a couple more questions to ask. God, Jesus, we've been going 35 minutes already, buddy. Right. We've talked about you before. We've talked about where we are, and we sort of touched on the pandemic, and don't know if we've got time for it. I do believe that there was quite a few positives for our industry, the pandemic. And I say this to every guest. I think it shone a light on our industry that people didn't know was there. So with that in mind, now that people are looking at this industry and it's developing more as a career choice, if you had that magic wand, what one significant change would you make to our industry right now? Like, what would it be and why?
What would it be and why? I think we need to look after ourselves more. I think we've touched upon it. I think there's lots of conversations about burnout and how we look after people, but not always a lot of action. I think it's easy to just, potentially, as we said, just keep going on that hamster wheel, and not only recognize successes, but allowing yourself time to breathe, which can only be good for you, the team, and the event that you're working on. So I think we need to do that a lot more. I think there needs to be more recognition of all the parts that everyone plays within the events industry. Again, if I look back at my career and the teams I ran, I was probably far too focused just on the commercial element, which is important, and did not appreciate enough the other elements that go into it. And specifically, I'm talking about operations. I think the operational teams within our industry, without them, and let me tell you, I don't think a salesperson could do the ops role.
I'm doing an ops director role at the moment.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this a long time, but even now, when I was doing the briefing, I was a bit like, didn't even know that. I was like, really, that's the ops bit? I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. I would say, there has been a lot of positive change. Just to follow up, I think one big one I'm seeing is the style of leadership. I think people and culture, again, is spoken about a lot and words that are thrown around, but I do see it. I see that it's less so, and again, probably society in all sectors, a top-down approach. I think people realise, given the new blood that's coming into the industry, in most industries, they're not going to accept the sort of practices that maybe were norm when I first went into work. So I think that's definitely been a significant shift, and one that the pandemic's probably given us as well. And that goes hand in hand with sort of being, I guess, kinder to ourselves and each other, and our teams when we're working on events, because it can be hard and it can be arduous. That comes from good leadership as well. I think getting into sort of specifics, I've spoken about acquisitions and event design. I think there was lots of celebration when in-person events came back. The virtual events was dead. I don't like to sort of see that. There was lots of sort of jumping on the grave of virtual event tech. Let's not forget it was there when it needed us. And Eventex is still great and can be embraced, but it needs to be embraced the strategy phase of putting on an event. Not just sort of like as a plaster, say, right, I need this bit of kit to sort of fulfill this thing. So yeah, look, lots of amazing stuff happening in the industry. It's definitely more of a global world now. Lots of companies in the UK going to the States, and far-flung place of the world as well. It's definitely international, and it's a fantastic industry to be in.
And just on that, thank you for that. And just on that, the mental health, for those that maybe don't know, but friends of the show to follow, Laura Capel-Agra, that does amazing work with Stress Matters, and Helen Moon, who does amazing work with Eventwell. It's great that we can talk about this now. And I think you're so right there. There's a lot of talk. These are people, doing actions, and it's okay to talk about that. So thank you for bringing that up, my friend. So let's sort of reflect. Let's have a reflection talking about that. My wife's favorite word. If you right now could go back 5 years, right, and everything we've talked about, all the changes, all the evolution, everything we've gone through, 5 years in time, work-wise, what valuable piece of advice, what would you give to young Dan 5 years ago?
Right. Firstly, I wasn't young 5 years ago.
You know what? When I said it, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that, because 5 years ago, I was still 40. So
I appreciate it, but a compliment can't be stretched too much before it becomes. But listen, 5 years is a long time. Like the last 5 years, when we talk about pre-pandemic, seems like 500 years ago, doesn't it?
No.
So that would have been like 2018. I would just say, look, it's going to be okay. I've recognised, and you do when you get older, that nothing stays the same forever. Things always change, and I've also recognised that either you change something or people change it for you. So nothing is constant, but that's a positive. Recognise that there's always going to be opportunities around the corner. You don't have to grab everything, not the new shiny toy. Sometimes you're right doing what you're doing, and it's the same with life as it is in business. And it's looking after yourself, praising yourself, I would say. And also not care too much about what other people think.
That's
because I think we all, especially if you're on social media, that it's sometimes hard not to. I've done my podcast, which has been great, but the flip side of it, you become obsessed with what people think about it and engagement. And that can sometimes lead to not very good conversations in your head. So I think just generally, it's going to be okay. Don't take life too seriously, even though there are still things in life, or take the things in life that need to be taken seriously, and the others sort of just leave.
Yeah. Oh, very nice. Last question, my friend.
Yeah.
With everything you've been through, your experience, it's phenomenal. You really get a real feeling of you today. But think about people looking to come into the sectors, events, media, software, everything you've mentioned. Like, what would your advice be to those coming in? What would you sort of want them to listen to and act on as well?
Well, I think firstly, events, as we know, is a broad church, right? So, you still say to people you work in events, they think you run wedding shows or you put on a concert or you're a singer or whatever it is. So I think, it's a positive, but it can seem quite vast. So I would say search around, attend events. Attend as many events as you can, whether at a consumer show, trade show, festival, whatever it is. And then narrow it down, think about, actually, if I want to get in events, this is the type of event I would like to work on. Because ultimately, it's a long process. You've got to enjoy what you're working on, right? Do you want to be in an event where actually it means you're out of the office a lot? Or do you prefer to sit behind a desk and planning? Then talk to people. Talk to people. There's also lots of opportunities for work placement. There's at the moment more internships, which are now definitely more paid for than they ever used to be. Try different things. There's so many opportunities, regardless of what event you choose to do, whether that's sales, marketing, ops, all supplier side, which you haven't talked about. And try things. I just think there's so much opportunity. Just a shout out to the Power of Events. If you don't know, have a look at their website. They've just launched a new app next week. And the Power of Events was there for that very reason, to sort of span the whole of Britain, allow people to access it and see what's on offer. There's just so much. It's just such a massive and can be rewarding industry, albeit hard work. But what isn't? If you become a lawyer, you still got to sit there at your desk and work hard. So it's very sociable. If you like that, you'll meet lots of good friends, make lots of good contacts. And I think it's just a great industry to be in. As I coming full circle from what I said at the beginning, there's nothing like turning up at an event that you've helped create in whatever shape or form.
Yeah, I think that's that thing. And even myself, it's taking that time. Well, listen, Dan, that went fast. Thank you so much, buddy.
Right.
Genuinely, your story, your journey, it's very, very unique. But also, I think the ideas and the sort of the perspective you've given to people just gives people a deeper appreciation for, I suppose, your passion really and your dedication to industry. And I see what you put out there. I see, you're banging that drum for the industry as well, which is awesome. And also your own accomplishments and getting to know you better today it's been really cool. So look, generally happy to record the episode with you today. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. Please follow Dan, LinkedIn, all the other bits and pieces that he's on, and obviously the very humbly and imaginatively titled Dan Assor Show podcast. Please follow and subscribe to that. Just a reminder to everyone, we're streaming live. You can listen to this. It will be available ever and ever. Stay updated. Go to my LinkedIn profile, turn on notifications to be reminded of future episodes, or with my fortnightly newsletter about recruitment. Dan, before I wrap things up, any final thoughts, words of wisdoms you'd like to leave our audience with?
I just think that it's really enjoyable. I didn't mention my podcast, but really the main reason why I do that is just to cement what I've just said before. It gets me to meet lots of great people. That's how we met. I get the opportunity to speak to fantastic people within the industry. Broadens my understanding of people as individuals and professionally as well. So that's why I do that. But thank you, Mr. Personality of the Year, M&IT.
Oh, we nearly got through it, didn't we?
What you do is amazing as well. I think, recruiters, they're an easy target, but, they fulfill a vital role in what we do. And I would suggest that most people that are listening to this and generally know someone that's had a very positive experience with a recruiter, and without them wouldn't have their career wouldn't be where it's at today. So keep banging the drum.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you ever so much. So, all right, folks, that is a wrap for episode 11. Just remember, there's enough BS in the world already, so please treat recruitment as a strategy. Don't just stick it on the side of the desk. Thanks for watching.